Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. My phone wouldn't shut up. It just kept buzzing across the kitchen table like a bug trapped under glass. Over and over. I didn't even need to look to know who it was. Mom, Dad, then Mom again. Probably sitting in some overpriced hotel lobby in Aspen, losing their minds. I didn't answer, not once. They thought this was a tantrum, a fight. Maybe I was mad about something they said. But it wasn't that. Not even close. My name's Ava. I'm 33. I'd just gotten back from a 2-year contract working security for a logistics firm in the Gulf. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home. Not my parents, not my brother, nobody. The only person I wanted to see was Grandma Nellie. I got in around midnight the night before. No traffic coming into Elk Bend. Just that old diner sign flickering like always. I didn't even take a suitcase inside. Just grabbed some flowers from the gas station and headed straight to her house. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. When I walked in, the house was cold. Not just chilly, cold. Dark too. No TV on, no nightlight. I called out for her, but nothing. Just the low whine of her oxygen machine and something else I couldn't place at first. This soft, uneven breathing. I found her in the recliner, slumped to one side, her eyes barely open. Her lips were dry. Her hand was reaching toward the side table. There was a full glass of water sitting there, just out of her reach. I froze. For maybe 2 seconds, I just stood there staring at that damn glass. Then I snapped out of it. I grabbed it, held it to her lips, called 911. My voice cracked when I gave our address. I remember that. I don't cry easily, but my throat gave out on that call. Turns out she hadn't seen a nurse in over 3 weeks. No groceries in the fridge. The heating unit had been shut off due to non-payment. She was barely hanging on. Now I was back at her place, watching my phone rattle with calls from people who'd rather be popping champagne than checking in on their mother. They didn't know their credit cards were frozen. Not yet. I'd taken care of that early this morning. I sipped my water and let it ring. Then I slid the phone across the table and stood up. I had work to do. I stepped over the laundry pile near the door and grabbed my laptop off the couch, still in the clothes I wore on the plane. I hadn't even unpacked. I pulled up Facebook while the kettle heated. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew they'd post something. They always did. Frank and Marianne couldn't go 5 minutes without announcing their perfect little life to the internet. There it was, a fresh photo, less than an hour old. Them in Aspen, standing on a snow-covered balcony, holding martinis in crystal glasses. Mom wore that ridiculous white fur coat I always hated. Dad had sunglasses on, even though it was obviously overcast. The caption read, "Living the Dream." I stared at it for a full minute. Grandma Nellie was down the hall, barely holding on. This was their idea of a dream. I opened the Care app tied to her in-home nurse. I still had access. I'd helped her set it up before I deployed. The last logged visit was 31 days ago. I checked her bank account. The automatic payments had been canceled. No explanation, no replacement nurse. Just a cold stop. They'd let her sit in that house alone. For what? So they could sip cocktails at altitude and post hashtags? The kettle screamed. I let it. I didn't even make the tea. I called the care agency next. The woman who answered asked for the client's name and paused when I gave it. I could hear the hesitation in her voice. "She's been inactive for nearly a month," she said. "Inactive?" I repeated. "Yes, the family contact. Frank, I believe. Signed a termination form electronically. Said they'd made alternate arrangements." I hung up without saying goodbye. Alternate arrangements. Right. I opened the fridge and found a shriveled bag of baby carrots and an expired bottle of milk. Nothing else. I stood there staring at the empty shelves, feeling my fists clench without thinking about it. These weren't oversights. This wasn't a scheduling error. This was a choice. I sat down on the floor with my back against the cabinets and opened the financial app again. I started flagging every transaction, first for Grandma's accounts, then the shared one she kept with Dad for household expenses. There were withdrawals every week, flights, spa bookings, hotel bills, spa, not caregiver, not groceries, not heating. I heard a cough from down the hall and got up fast. She was awake, her eyes half open. She looked confused but calm. I sat next to her and held her hand. It was ice cold. I tucked another blanket over her legs and stayed there a minute. Then I grabbed my phone and snapped a photo. Her room, the state of it, the glass of water, her frail face, time-stamped, documented. I wasn't playing anymore. They thought I was some dumb security grunt with a badge and a duffel bag. They forgot who taught me to read fine print, who drilled discipline into me, who reminded me that real love isn't loud, it's steady, it's showing up, it's doing the hard things when no one's watching. And she was lying right in front of me. That was the moment it shifted, not gradually, instantly. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was her shield. I turned off the light in Grandma's room and pulled the door halfway shut behind me. She was resting easy now, breathing slower, steadier. I leaned against the hallway wall for a second, just listening. And all I could think about was that dinner, the last one before I deployed. Early spring. Same round oak table, same forced laughs, same wine Mom thought made her worldly. The three of them were already seated when I walked in. Mom, Dad, and Chase. Deep in some story about a tech guy Chase met at a conference in Austin. Something about seed money and branding strategy. "Ava," Mom had called, half rising to air kiss my cheek. "You're tan. Did you go somewhere already?" I hadn't. I'd just been running drills outside the base nonstop, but no one really listened after that. Chase had a laptop open, and Dad leaned in like he was looking at NASA blueprints. "Okay, hear me out," Chase said. "Gluten-free, organic, pet treats." Dad blinked like he'd just discovered gold. "That's actually genius." I laughed out loud. Couldn't help it. "You think Scout cares if his biscuit has wheat in it?" "Health matters," Chase said, "especially for dogs with sensitive stomachs." "They roll in dead animals, Chase." He ignored me and went back to showing Dad some mock-ups of packaging. Meanwhile, I sat there and picked at my salad. No one asked about my departure date. No one asked about the Gulf. Nothing. So I brought it up myself. "I got promoted last week," I said. "Lead security liaison. I'll be overseeing risk protocol at a compound in Bahrain." Mom nodded like I'd just told her I'd bought new socks. Dad didn't even look up from Chase's screen. Finally, he muttered, "Just don't get yourself blown up for a paycheck." No congratulations, no pride, no interest. Chase said, "Bahrain? Where even is that?" I didn't answer. I just stared at the candle in the center of the table and thought about how long I'd been waiting to feel seen in that house. They always had energy for his ideas, even the dumb ones, especially the dumb ones. Before the pet treat nonsense, it was the mobile axe-throwing trailer. Before that, the coffee subscription box for men who lift. And every time he pitched one of these doomed little dreams, they applauded like he'd solved world hunger. Me? I handled high-level intel and live security assessments in active zones. My clearance level was higher than Dad's ever had at his old accounting firm. But all they saw was a uniform, a job they didn't understand, a daughter they couldn't brag about at cocktail parties. That dinner ended like it always did, with Chase getting the last word and me helping clear the plates while Mom told me how worried she was about the stress I chose for myself. I told her stress was relative. She poured herself another glass of Chardonnay and changed the subject. That was over a year ago, but it never left me. The table. The silence after my news. The way they glanced at each other, like they didn't know what to say, or worse, didn't care enough to fake it. And now here we were. Chase was off posting inspirational quotes about entrepreneurship being a mindset, and our mother was in a ski lodge pretending she hadn't let her own mother rot alone in a chair. I walked into the kitchen and dumped out their wine from the fridge. I didn't know why it was still here. Their silence used to hurt. Now it fueled me. I rinsed the empty wine bottles and dumped them in the recycling bin out back. The air was sharp, colder than I expected for spring. My breath fogged in front of me as I leaned on the railing. I thought about Bahrain. 6 months earlier, I was in a canvas-walled command tent, staring down a line of printed invoices and knowing something didn't add up. The numbers were slick on paper, but I'd seen the real shipment sizes. Local vendors were slipping bribes to base procurement guys to inflate delivery costs. 1,000 gallons of diesel that never existed. Food containers that never made it off the truck. I brought it up to Sergeant Kilmer first. He told me to chill and not make waves. Wrong answer, so I went above him, straight to Major Cardenas, a Marine who didn't blink at confrontation and didn't waste words. I laid out the paper trail in a clear chain. Dates, payments, inventory gaps, no fluff, just evidence. He asked one question. "You sure this sticks?" I nodded. "Yes, sir." He picked up the radio, gave a short series of orders, and 20 minutes later, every pending vendor payment was locked down. No grand speech, no applause, just a simple nod from across the tent. That nod landed harder than anything my father ever said to me. Later that night, Cardenas called me back in. "You've got good instincts," he said. Don't waste them asking for permission next time. I stood there, sweaty and wired, pretending to be cool while every part of me was screaming finally. That's what it felt like to be trusted. Back home, I was the daughter who chose stress and couldn't just work a normal job. On base, I was the person people came to when something didn't smell right, when pressure hit, when it mattered. I wasn't pretending. I wasn't just a warm body in a uniform. I made real decisions, with consequences. I wasn't scared of conflict. I ran toward it. And the higher-ups didn't just notice, they counted on it. It's wild how people who barely know you can see your worth more clearly than the ones who raised you. At home, it was all image, all narrative. Smile for the Christmas card, brag about Chase's latest brainstorm, pretend like everything was polished and perfect. In Bahrain, nobody cared where I went to school or how I looked in a dress. They cared if I showed up, kept my head straight, and didn't fold under pressure. And I didn't. Not when the numbers looked off. Not when the sergeant gave me that warning smirk. Not when the higher-ups started poking around to see who blew the whistle. I held the line, just like Grandpa taught me. Inside, Grandma coughed again. A long one this time. I turned and walked back in without hesitating. Time to show up again. I checked on Grandma, adjusted her blanket, then stepped out of the room and headed down to the basement. That place hadn't changed. Still smelled like sawdust and oil. Tools lined the pegboard, old radios stacked along the back bench, a busted lantern from a camping trip that never got thrown out. His work jacket still hung on the back of his stool. I ran my hand over it, stiff from years of grease and weather. Granddad Gerald had always seen me. No faking it with him. He didn't care if I wore dresses or boots, didn't care that I'd rather lift a wrench than paint my nails. He used to say, "You've got a grit that doesn't wash off." We'd sit down here for hours. I'd hand him sockets, hold the flashlight while he fixed things. He'd tell me stories, real ones, about working on pipeline crews, welding in the winter, scraping rust off engines so they'd run another year. He never once told me to smile more, just taught me how to be useful. One time, after I asked why he didn't just hire someone to fix his busted generator, he looked up and said, "Some people inherit cash, others inherit duty. Guess which one lasts longer?" That stuck. After I found Grandma, after I got her stable and breathing again, that line came back to me. And with it, the memory of the safe. I pulled the tool rack back from the wall, just enough to get behind it. There, under the pegboard, was the small black dial embedded in the concrete. He never wrote the combo down. It was our secret. The date we caught our first fish. June 6th, 2002. Lake Geneva. I still had the photo of us holding that sad little perch. I spun the dial slow. Left, right, left, click. Inside were exactly 3 things. The will, a durable power of attorney naming Dad, and a sealed manila envelope labeled in my grandfather's sharp handwriting, contingency, red if. My pulse jumped. I took it upstairs, closed the kitchen door behind me, and opened it with a knife. Inside, instructions, contact names, legal phrasing, and a single typed paragraph that spelled it all out in blunt, unflinching language. If certain care conditions were breached, elder neglect, misuse of funds, medical abandonment, the power of attorney could be revoked under Clause E, triggering emergency estate oversight by the alternate executor listed. That executor was me. His signature was dated 2 years before he passed. He saw this coming. Maybe not every detail, but enough to plan for it. He'd put the tripwire in place and trusted I'd know when to pull it. I looked over at the fridge. There was still a magnet holding up a picture of all of us from some barbecue years ago. Chase front and center, Mom holding a wine glass, Dad in his golf polo, me off to the side like I photobombed the family by accident. Screw that. I tucked the documents into my backpack and grabbed my phone. It was time to make a call. I sat down at the kitchen table, backpack still zipped, phone in hand. I didn't hesitate. I pulled up the contact. Mr. Lowell answered on the second ring. Lowell and Grant Law. "This is Eva Harland," I said. "Rank, civilian contractor, private sector security, Gerald Harland's granddaughter. I'm invoking Clause E of the estate, triggered under elder endangerment conditions." There was a pause, then his voice shifted. Less polite, more alert. "Do you have the proof?" "I do." He gave me a private upload link. I sent it all. Time-stamped photos of Grandma in that chair, the unreachable water glass, the heating shutoff notice, The nurse's service log, the agency termination confirmation. Every one of Dad's bank withdrawals lined up against Grandma's missed payments. I didn't leave a single detail out. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Effective immediately, Mr. Lowell said. All accounts, including joint and discretionary family funds, are frozen pending investigation. Legal notices will go out within the hour. Understood. Do you need help arranging emergency care? I already have a team. I hung up and made the next call. A local medical home care unit I vetted during my last visit back. 3 nurses, a rotating schedule, 24-hour coverage. Expensive, but no games. I can pay up front, I told the coordinator. Start tonight. Your grandmother's lucky, she said. Most families don't act that fast. Number, they don't. I cleared the back bedroom, set up clean linens, moved the oxygen machine in there so she wouldn't be stuck in a recliner all day. I made a list: meds, meals, follow-ups, anything I couldn't cover while she slept. I left the rest to the professionals. I didn't care what it cost. Every dollar they spent on spas and ski trips, I'd outmatch with 1 hour of actual care. This wasn't about payback. It was about control. I ran this like I ran any mission. Start with the intel, identify vulnerabilities, execute clean, no emotion. Just results. By morning, she was bathed, fed, and resting on clean sheets. The nurse on duty gave me a full vitals report and a medication log. I reviewed it line by line. She didn't blink. Former military, she asked. Something like that? I set up cameras inside the house. Nothing invasive, just basic entryway and hallway coverage. I synced the feeds to my phone, every angle secure. I didn't leave the property for 5 days straight. I fielded calls from Mom's number, ignored them. A couple came from Chase too. He left one voicemail, something whiny about overstepping and making things worse. I archived it without listening to the end. There was no debate anymore. This was an operation, and I was the only one qualified to lead it. On the 6th day, I sent the calendar invite. Subject, Estate Oversight. Clause E Review. Time, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time attendees. Eva Harlan, Frank Harlan, Marianne Harlan, Mr. Lowell, legal counsel. I got a read receipt from both of them within an hour. No RSVP, no reply. But I knew they'd show. The money had stopped moving, and I hadn't picked up the phone in days. They were desperate for a crack in the wall. At 6:59, I clicked Join Meeting. The screen loaded slowly, one pixelated square at a time. I saw Dad first, slouched on the edge of a stiff hotel bed, jaw clenched, wearing that same windbreaker he wore when he got flustered. Mom sat behind him, wrapped in some hotel bathrobe, her hair pulled into a sloppy bun. The curtain behind them was half open, showing a parking lot and nothing else. Mr. Lowell joined with his camera off, only his initials in the corner. Typical lawyer move. Okay, I said. Let's begin. Dad leaned forward. What the hell did you do, Eva? His voice cracked halfway through it. Not rage, panic. He looked humiliated and pissed off all at once. I didn't answer right away. I clicked share screen and brought up the first slide. A photo of Grandma in the recliner, time-stamped. Next to it, the care agency log showing the last nursing visit had been 31 days earlier. Slide 1, I said. Neglect of care. You don't get to, Dad started, but I cut him off with a click. Slide 2, bank statements. Every withdrawal from the shared account over the past 6 weeks, luxury lodging, restaurant charges, ski passes, labeled and color-coded. Slide 2, misuse of funds designated for elder care. Mom gasped quietly behind him. She hadn't seen these numbers. Her hand flew to her chest like she wanted to clutch some invisible pearls. Ava, she said softly, we needed rest. We. Slide 3, the Facebook post. Living the dream. Above their smiling faces, cocktail glasses raised like they just hit a jackpot. I didn't speak. They stared at it in silence. This is disgusting, Dad muttered. You ambushed us. You went behind our backs. I executed legal procedure under Clause E, I said. You breached duty of care. You gave me the trigger. Mr. Lowell finally unmuted. His voice was low and clear. Frank, Marianne, the documentation is sound. Your financial control over Nellie Harlan's estate is officially suspended, effective immediately. What does that mean? Mom asked. Her voice started to shake. It means, I said, you have no access to the estate, its funds, its accounts, or its assets. Your cards are frozen. Your names are off everything. You don't have the right, Dad shouted. I do, I snapped. And you signed that right away years ago when you didn't bother to read the fine print. This is revenge, Mom said, barely above a whisper. No, I said, staring straight into the camera. This is what accountability looks like. Mr. Lowell kept going. Frank, you were named POA on the condition of adequate care. That condition was not met. Your father anticipated the possibility of mishandling. Eva is the alternate executor and is now acting within full authority. Dad stood up and walked off camera. I heard a drawer slam. Mom leaned toward the screen. Ava, baby. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were tired. It's been a hard year. You don't understand what we've been carrying? I shook my head slowly. What I understand is that you chose comfort over caregiving. You chose vacation over responsibility. You let your mother sit in silence for weeks so you could take photos on a mountain. She blinked hard, trying to summon tears. None came. I'm sorry, she said. You're sorry you got caught. Behind her, Dad came stomping back into view, holding something in his hand. Maybe a receipt, maybe a card. He waved it like it was a defense. Do you even know how much stress we've been under? He barked. You think this was easy, managing all this? You think you could have done better? I am doing better. He froze, his arm dropped. I've been here, I continued, feeding her, washing her, paying for round-the-clock nurses out of my own pocket while you two played house in the Rockies. Mr. Lowell cleared his throat. Unless there's further legal dispute, this meeting is concluded. I ended the share screen. The Zoom window hung for another few seconds. I loved her, Mom said. One final swing. You had a funny way of showing it. Then I clicked Leave Meeting and closed the laptop. The moment I clicked Leave Meeting, the screen went black. Just like that. Done. No more questions. No more justifications. I sat back and let the silence wash over me. Down the hall, Grandma's oxygen machine hissed steady and calm. That sound used to make my stomach twist. Now it told me everything was running the way it should. She was safe. That night, I slept in the armchair next to her bed, woke up every time she stirred, held her hand when she opened her eyes, helped her sip water from a straw when her throat was dry. I fed her warm broth, changed her socks, brushed her hair. I stayed right there for weeks. We didn't talk much. She was too weak for full conversations, but every time she looked at me, there was something quiet in her expression, like she knew. One night, as we watched some rerun of Jeopardy, with the volume low, she turned her head toward me and whispered, "You did good, kid." That was the last full sentence she ever spoke. A few mornings later, just after sunrise, I found her with her hands folded under the quilt. Her chest didn't rise. Her lips looked soft, peaceful, still warm. She didn't pass alone. She left surrounded by warmth and dignity, not buried under dust in some forgotten chair. I made the calls, arranged everything the way she would have wanted. Simple, respectful, no speeches, just the right hymns, the right flowers, no show. Mr. Lowell scheduled the estate signing at his office the following week. I walked in, signed where he pointed, didn't flinch once. The keys to the house, the deed, the remaining assets, all officially mine. I never even brought a single box inside, didn't change the curtains, didn't paint the walls. I didn't want to reclaim anything. That house had been a shrine to appearances for too long, to brunches and backpats and fake smiles. The truth only ever lived in the corners, in the basement, in the workroom where real things got built and fixed and passed down without a fuss. I listed it the same month. Cash buyer, no drama, gone. The money? That would come later. But the house itself, the one they worshipped like it proved they were better than the rest of town, I let it go without a second thought. I didn't need their empire. I was building something else. The day the house sale cleared, I wired every last cent into a new account under a different name, the Gerald and Nellie Trust Network. It wasn't a vanity project. It wasn't about healing. It was infrastructure. We built it from the ground up, a real-deal nonprofit providing free legal aid and emergency funds for elderly parents of deployed military. No red tape, no press releases, just fast action when things went sideways. My board was small but lethal. Pete Callahan, retired JAG, could quote military code in his sleep, gave off that quiet shark vibe. May Crenshaw, Navy vet who cussed like a diesel mechanic and didn't believe in hand-holding. And Diane Ellis, a social worker from Tulsa who had zero tolerance for excuses and called everyone sweetheart in a tone that made grown men sweat. We ran lean. No corner offices, no suits. You had a grandmother going without insulin because her daughter was deployed in Djibouti and some neighbor forgot to drop off meds. We sent a courier. You had a grandfather who hadn't eaten in 3 days because his son's power of attorney was being misused by an ex-wife. We sent a lawyer. No speeches, just execution. I didn't talk about the money. People asked where the startup funds came from. I told them it was a family matter, which wasn't a lie. In 6 months, we'd helped 42 families. Real cases, real outcomes. No one left in the lurch. No one forgotten just because their kid was in uniform and couldn't be in 2 places at once. We started getting emails, letters. Some came from commanders who heard about us through word of mouth. Others came directly from service members stuck overseas, begging for help they couldn't give from half a world away. We showed up where no one else did. And then one day, right after I'd come back from a field visit in Oklahoma, I opened my inbox and saw it. From Marianne Harland. Subject, Ava. Just that. No body text preview. I clicked it open. I'm sorry. We have nothing. That was it. No greeting, no details, just 7 words. I stared at it for maybe 5 seconds, not out of shock, not out of sympathy, just to make sure I'd read it right. Then I hit archive and went back to work. Pete was on a Zoom call with a VA rep about a funding clause we'd been fighting to rewrite. Diane was in the back office updating intake records. May had her boots up on the table, reading a client file with a pen in her mouth. I didn't say a word to any of them. We had real problems to deal with. Not guilt notes from people who thought sorry could erase decades of rot. This wasn't a therapy session. It was a mission. And I wasn't slowing down. I don't think of this as revenge. It's just finishing the job my granddad started. I spent too many years feeling like a ghost in my own family. But that part's over. It's done. I'm out of their orbit now, and what I'm doing and what I've built matters. Real work, real impact. Every time I sign a document or approve a care stipend, I think of Grandma. I think of that night I found her alone, just as her glass of water sat out of reach. That's who I am now. My parents, they're just noise. They don't matter anymore. I stopped waiting for them to get it. I stopped trying to make them see me, to make them understand. That chapter is finished. Legacy isn't something you spend. It's something you uphold, and I'm living proof of that. I don't need their approval. I never did. I was never chasing their respect. I was becoming the kind of person my granddad respected. The kind of person who does the right thing, no matter how hard, no matter how messy. That's enough for me. I used to think their approval was something I needed to keep me grounded. But I realized I was grounded the moment I put my hand on Grandma's. The moment I made the decision to stop waiting for permission and just act. I can live with that. I can live with knowing that what I do now, helping people who can't help themselves, is the kind of work that matters. And every time I sit at this desk, every time I pick up the phone to call someone who needs help, I think of the trust that was passed down to me. I think of my granddad, and I know I'm carrying it forward. That's my legacy. That's my promise.